Okay, let's look at company settings. This will actually show a lot of the features that we've got. So at the very top, we've got the company address, name, phone number, contact information, and the contacts 1, 2, and 3. Billing section, this is where you'd set up your information for doing direct deposits and such. So you've got your EFT originator ID, your short name, long name, institution, so you can choose from a list of banks. The transit number, account number, and file creation number for the EFT file that gets created from payroll. Phone number formats, tax, so put in your tax numbers, your business number, and your employer account identifier for T4s. Your taxes used for purchasing, and whether the taxes are compounded, and whether you're posting to QST. General ledger, so this first section has one called location segment and profit center segment. So you can segmentize your GL to up to 4 segments, and one of those segments can be chosen for a location. And what if you then choose that segment for the location, then all postings that you do will automatically get that segment appended to it when it posts. So if you set up your sales departments in your inventory, for instance, and a sales account to say account 4000, then if you log in as being, and you'll be prompted when you log into the program which location you're logging into, it will then automatically post, instead of going to 4000, it will go to 4000 / and the segment name that you choose for the location. They can also use allocation accounts for those. So it may be that whenever you log in at location B, you want, instead of going 4000, you want to go to 4020. So you can then create an allocation account that is 4000 / B for the location, which 100% of that posts to account 4020. So you can use, actually set up segments, so you do segmented accounting, or you can use pseudo segments that have it redirect to a different account based on the location you log in as. Profit Center works the same way, except that this does it on a sales order by sales order situation, where you can change a posting at the top of an order. You choose a different profit center. Say you have a sales center and a service center, and you use the same code, say a labor account for each of them. There is a inventory item called labor, but if you change to the service profit center, then it redirects the posting the same way as our location does. Okay, the next one on the list is the Differential Gl Account. So we have a feature that allows you to set the cost of an item depending on who you sell it to. So if you receive an item into stock and it costs you $100, it of course needs to debit your account for the $100 when you receive it, your inventory GL account. But when you sell it to customer ABC, your vendor gives you a rebate of, say, $10. And so on the sales order, you want it to show a $90 cost instead. But if we post that sales order and allow it to post the inventory, the full $100 would normally get debited, which is not going to work out. So we now post $90, and the differential, gets posted to the Differential Gl account. And that means that the $10 will go to account usually set up as called vendor rebate. So you're debiting the $100 to the inventory like it should, and then crediting $10 to the differential account. So some industries use this quite a bit, where the vendor gives a special cost for a quoted cost for a particular customer. Okay, we got enabling job costing on and off, enabling divisions on and off, and whether the GL is integrated or turned on. The only time you'd ever turn off GL integration normally is during setup, but anytime you want a posting to happen without general ledger, you uncheck that. This is all your accounts. This is where you can do your setups and everything for adding and editing and exporting accounts. your fiscal period set up here. You can set the number of lock periods here, of course, as well. And when you change any of these periods, it automatically reorgs the data so that it reposts it properly to the right accounts. Okay, so allocation accounts are for setting up accounts that you want to have it distribute over several other accounts. So if you have an account set up for your telephone expense, it's got to distribute to a couple of different segments or departments or something, you can create an allocation account that you do 10% here, 20% there, and as long as the total adds up to 100% when you post it, it'll automatically distribute it. Okay, segments, this is where you would set up your anywhere from 1 to 4 segments, and you would give it a length, a name, and whether it's alphanumeric, numeric, or alpha. Okay, you set up your groups. This is the set of groups that would normally be used when you're creating your GL account. So you would put your accounts into, and then subgroups. So if you wanted to total or subtotal things within subgroups, you'd create them here. Multi-currency, this would enable or disable a multi-currency, and if you turn it on, you do need to choose a base currency for this particular company. Special accounts, here you would set up each of your special accounts where it knows where to, things like control accounts and your standard accounts for expenses and such as that. So you got billing accounts, accounts payable, and point of sale accounts. Employee setup, default city address, contact labels, default department, and the default pay frequency. Sequence numbers. Here you can change what the starting GL transaction, job transaction, check, purchase order, equipment ID for the service module, an inventory, what the next inventory receipt is, the next adjustment, the next receipt, and the next transfer. In the sales side of things, the invoice number, sales order number, quote, and if you want to separate them types of orders or separate the orders by type, you can do so, turn that on, and then the booking, standing, RMA, work orders, and rental orders will get its own sequence, set of sequence numbers for the program. Plus you can then colorize what the tag of the order is as well there. And what I didn't mention is that you can get into company settings while people are in. There's nothing stopping from getting in. The only caveat that comes up if they are in is that when you're going to save a change to, say, a next order number, so if I change this to 3, and if I hit save here, you need to just make sure that nobody's creating new orders, because if they, at the same time that it's not going to cause a problem, but if at the time when they go to create an order, it's going to jump up the number sequence or whatever you change it to at that time. Okay, and for production orders, which is one of our optional modules, you want to set what your next production order number is and the next template number, and whether you want it to use its own sequence numbers for production or use one of the purchase order history. I suggest you turn this on so it uses its own set of numbers. Variable names, just if some of the fields are renamable, you can do that from here. Sales departments, you can go up to 200 different sales departments, so you can set them up for your sales account, cost of goods, and your inventory account. Okay, under sales orders, let's just start with the orders tab here. You can, if you use divisionalized accounting, you can set it so it separates it by division. User-Selectable Kit Components are where it explodes a kit onto an order and allows you to select which components get consumed or get put onto the order. Match lowest price and price matrix means it checks to see if the customer qualifies for a lower price somewhere in the system. So if your sell price is normally $5 and you give him a special price of $6 and this is turned on, it will give him the $5. Use customer's default warehouse. So if the customer has a warehouse, if you turn this on, it'll be a place to set up a customer's warehouse so that it uses the sales information, or pulls the inventory from that warehouse as opposed to the user logged in warehouse. Whether to use serialized costing and lot numbering. This is just the cost that goes into the sales history, not the GL. And use serialized selling. So you can have a sell price per lot number and per serial number as well. That way, if you've got one that's a higher cost on it, you may want to put a higher sell price on it as well. Okay, use cost from inventory non-physical. So if you don't have this checked, non-physical items always go at zero cost, and you can type in a cost on the sales order of what it should be. If you check this, then as you receive inventory for non-physical items and POs, it'll use that cost in there. Okay, this is if you allow your inventory to overcommit. So you're allowing it to go negative, which you really shouldn't do because costings are not correct then. This is to prohibit it. And this is a setting called always ship, which means you don't really have inventory levels and you just want to always ship out product. It's like it's basically setting everything at a non-physical type item. It just completely disables the back order system and ships everything always. Okay, whether you require a salesperson on an order, require a territory on an order, and default salesperson with the login ID if the customer is blank. So if you got a salesperson called Joe and the login ID when I log in, it's right down here, you see I've logged in as a user Spire, but if my login ID was Joe and there was a salesperson set up for Joe, then if the customer doesn't already have a salesperson, it automatically puts Joe on the order as the salesperson. Okay, set the default required date. So that's if you have, you want the required to get date to be set up as default when you do an order. And the date before an order is required. So if you typically take 4 days or 3 days to ship an order, you create the order, the required date will always get bumped up by 3 days. Now that doesn't take into account weekends or working days or non-working days. It's just 3 days from the day you create the order. Warn on zero price. So if you sell something at a zero price, it warns you. Automatically update the customer price table. So what this does is if you sell something to a customer at a certain price and you change the price on the order, it'll automatically save that price into the customer specific pricing when you save this order. It is a dangerous setting. It's a warning that if you're going to use this, think carefully, because if you one day give a person a deal on a particular item because he bought a bunch of other stuff, it's going to remember that deal every time he buys that from now on. If somebody doesn't notice it, it's going to sell it to him too cheaply. And create records for shipping addresses only. So that's for pricing. Do you want it to only create the record for this automatic update for the particular ship to that you did for that sale? Okay, so up here under process invoicing, whether you want to enable our process status for an order. So that allows you to click a button at the top of the order that says process. So if your orders go through a state where you process them for picking, this should be turned on. If you go directly to invoicing from creating an order, you don't need this. And enabling shipping status, this is after an order is processed, the shipper can then mark it as shipped, and that way the accounting department knows to bill it. So if you want to enable that feature, you can turn it on. Whether you want to allow an order to be processed again, once an order is processed, it locks it, except for certain users, so they can't go in and process again, therefore print another picking list. If you don't need that feature for prohibiting it, you can just turn this off. Prompt on zero freight. So if you don't put freight on it, it'll warn you that you forgot to add freight, whether freight's taxable or not. Zero freight after shipping, or after invoicing. So if you have an order and you put freight on it, and then you go to invoice and there's back orders on it, this setting will zero out that freight, so you need to re-enter the freight for the next time you ship off that back order. Okay, so then the method of freight charging, whether you want to set a rate, whether it's a fixed amount or to prompt for it, and then what percentage, what the minimum charge is, the maximum charge, and to charge it only for orders below a certain value or not. Okay, for invoicing, you can set user-selectable invoice numbers, which means that you type in, it will use the next number in the sequence, but you are allowed to overwrite it. So if you're typically invoicing throughout the day, but then somebody comes in with an order book that they've left manual invoices with a customer, then you can key them in and then type in those numbers, and they can be alphanumeric. Whether to lock processed orders or not, so that they're locked for editing. Batch invoicing, so batch posting. So Normally, we're set up for live invoicing, which means that when you click the invoice button, it posts it immediately and updates all the ledgers. You go to batch invoicing, you can invoice throughout the day. The customer gets a copy of the invoice, but at the end of the day, you can review them and post them to the ledgers. You got to be careful with this setting, because if you do edit them, if you have that security level, then you have to make sure the customer doesn't already have a copy of the wrong invoice. Okay, then we have our credit system with you. When you turn on credit authorization, it checks more stringently for customers' credit. Do you want them to check the credit when you process the order? So instead of just at invoice time, you want to check it when it's processed. Therefore, you can stop it from getting out the door. Disable credit for when they're over their terms. So without this set, it'll check credit limit but not terms. So turn that on if you want to. Check the order when saving. So this is before processing and you're just saving an order. Do you want it to check the credit then? And do you want the credit checking to be based on the order quantity or the shipped quantity? So a lot of times an order is taken and the greatest part of the value of an order has been back ordered, but you still want to check on the whole amount that could ship, and therefore you can turn that on and have it ship. Okay, allow fill back orders on processed orders. So we have a button on our sales order list that you can click that will push all back orders automatically through the system. But if an order's already been processed, which really means that it's been shipped, you typically wouldn't want that to happen. But depending on your setup and your procedures, you may want to turn that on. Okay, use Suffix on order to manage back orders. So what this means is if you turn this on, every new order you create is going to have a -0 on the end of it. Now the order number can be 10 digits wide, so there has to be at least 2 digits at the end of it available. So if you start your order numbers with 9000000, you can't use this feature because it pushes everything over to the left a little bit so that it has room for that. So you need to at least start your order numbers with 00, and then you can have the suffixes turned on. Okay, create back orders when invoicing. What this does is that if you have our batch-based system, it will create, if you're using the batching that we have up here, then it will create the back orders as soon as you invoice it as opposed to waiting until you post it. Reset phase when invoicing with back orders. So we have a phase control system on our orders. You can create custom phases for an order that you can set up, that it can go through a mini series of phases and allow different reports to print as it reaches each phase. But once you've invoiced an order, a lot of times, or some companies want that phase to be reset back again to the beginning, and that's what this setting will do, and start over again. Okay, under inventory, what costing method to use, post standard cost to sales history. What this one means is that in inventory there's a cost called standard cost, which never changes unless a user changes it. And if you want that setting, or that that standard cost to get posted to sales history instead of current, you can do so. Therefore, if you pay commission on standard cost, you turn this on and you can run reports on that. Okay, standing orders, if you want the phase to get reset once a standing order has been invoiced. You may have a standing order that repeats itself month to month or week by week, and you put it through a series of phases before you invoice, and you want to get reset at the end of that, you can do so. Okay, surcharges. This is a lot used in the service industry where you charge a fee for shop supplies, or some people use this for charging fuel surcharges. So you may charge a minimum of, say, $5 and a maximum of $50, and you can set those up. And you can also now set up a GL account where that gets posted, some income account that you get charged on. And you set that up and then pick an alias for it, and here you call it fuel surcharge or shops fees. Whatever alias you set will show up at the bottom of the order, and that can then print on your customer's invoices at that time. Messages. So we've got a series of messages for over shipping. So if you say, something like not over shipping, sorry, for selling too low. So you can type in, price too low and a couple exclamation marks. And then if you have that, you can have it display that message on your sales orders and POS orders, or either or. And then what will happen is as soon as you sell for lower than the specified margin of that item, it will pop up this message. If you don't have this turned on, it'll display the cost in red or the margin in red, but this will actually be right in their face, and they'll know that they're selling it too low. And then if you want a warning displayed when POS overcommits, so a lot of times in POS they're walking up to the counter with a product, so typically you don't want to tell them, display a warning that you're over shipping, and then have to force ship it because it is right in there and they actually have it in their hands, so you want to be able to ship it. So typically you wouldn't want to display that warning. And another warning where a duplicate purchase order number has been used. So if a customer gives you a PO number, you put it on an order, it checks any open orders and any orders in sales history to see if it's been used and warns the user about it. And in here, if you want point of sale to always prompt for a customer or always use the cash sale customer setup. Accumulate items means that if you scan an item or type in an item more than once, it'll just change the quantity on the order. So if you scan an ABC widget once, twice, 3 times, it will go from 1, 2 to 3 instead of putting it on the order 3 different times. Some people don't want it to do that, so you can turn that off. The POS multiplier, what this is for, you can type in a times here, or an asterisk, or a plus, or whatever's handy on your keyboard, that you can, on POS, you can type in then 12 times, or whatever that character you put in there, and then the part number, and it'll just automatically put 12 of the part number on the order. You see that in grocery stores quite a bit. If they see you've got 6 of something, they'll go with a keyboard, type 6 times, and then scan the item. Same thing what this is for. The reason we have an multiplier code in here is because sometimes people have a barcode on systems that use an asterisk in them, so it's not always the best key to use. So then a plus key is good because, again, it's right on the numeric keypad. This is a home page. Just basically put in HTML location, whether it's a website or on your local server, that displays the messages inside a POS for advertising like you'd see in a grocery store quite often. Okay, here this one is if you copy an order or credit from sales history, it keeps the order number the way it was originally. If you don't turn that on, it'll do the next new order number. And same thing here, this one here is convert quotes to a sales order with the next order number. So if you have this on and you create order number 52555, if you then convert it into a quote, it goes and takes the queue number off of the order and puts the next order number on there and then saves what the original queue number was in another spot in the database. And allow users to set the sales order number for new orders. So if, again, it uses the next order number in sequence, but it allows the user to overtype that order number again in case it came from a different series of invoices that are maybe manually entered. Okay, and then our recurring orders, either for rentals or just standing orders, you can set the default repeat sequence. So if you always do monthly, you set this to monthly. Whenever you do a duplicate new order, or a new standing order or rental order, it'll set it at monthly. This is the email setup. So default email program means whatever your default program is set on your computer, that's the email settings it will use, and therefore you don't have to change anything here. But we recommend you do not use that and you set up the Spire email, because if you're using, say, for instance, Outlook, Microsoft releases service patches on a constant basis, and it breaks external programs from attaching email messages and sending attachments out with it. So we recommend not to use that at all. And from here, you just turn on the Spire email, set up your SMTP server name, the username for it, the password, whether it uses encryption or not. So for instance, if you use Gmail, you put on TLS and 587 for the port number, and then you put in your display name you want, the email address. BCC is important because you're not using an email program like Outlook, it's not going to show up in your sent items, well, unless you use something like Gmail, because then it will show up. You want to BCC yourself a copy, and then you can set up your incoming mail in your Outlook or whatever you use to say that all email coming from this address goes into a special folder called Sent from Spire, and then the reply to address. Payroll Setup, this is the accounts and deductions and benefits and the departments. Whether you want to apply purchase orders to accounts payable when they are received. This is the service order area, so this is our optional add-on program. By default, it's all set up for a vehicle type service, but this can be changed, and all the headings inside the service section will change from, say, service vehicle info to service info. Current reading can be odometer, or it can be Hobbs meter, or where it happens to be, and all the rest of the fields can be changed as well. Accounts receivable, this is your aging you set up here and what your monthly interest rate is. Accounts payable, your aging. Customer setup, this is how the default settings for your customer, when you create a new one, what city and all that it belongs to, credit information and such. Same as your vendor setup. Inventory setup, so do you use multi-warehouse or not? When you post inventory adjustments, do you want to touch the GO, which normally, of course, you should do that. And what the default receiving account is, this would be something like a Crude accounts payable. The default adjustment account, this would be where you want to write inventory off to. The markup account, so if you put a markup percentage in here and you transfer a piece of inventory, then you will want something, the markup would have to be posted somewhere. So you're going to debit the account for the value of the inventory, credit the other account for the marked up value, but of course being you have to be balanced, you need a GL account to post the difference to, and typically that's a sales account called intercompany transfers or something like that. The accrued freight percentages, so this is if you have a default amount that you want to accrue freight at, you can put that in here, same as duty and brokerage. Do you want to enable our landed cost system, which allows you to use these features, and save the landed cost? What that means is when you do a purchase order and you manually type in the amount of the accrued freight and duty and brokerage on a PO, which we have it line by line, it means it will save it to the inventory and remember it for next time. Whether you want to use serialized inventory or not, and to have it receive the inventory on receiving of it or just on sales. Costing method, average, FIFO, or average, current average FIFO. Now, the current or LIFO is only to be used it can only be used in U.S. databases, but average, standard, and FIFO can be used. Default stocking unit of measure when you create a new part number. Enforce product codes either means that when you put a product code on an item, it has to be in the list. Preventing over receiving on a purchase order, so if you order 10 of something and you receive 11, it will allow you to actually do that. Prohibitive negative inventory in the inventory selling, and use permissive FIFO. This is not recommended you turn on. What this means is allowing to go negative on FIFO inventory, but because it uses a bucket system for selling, if you allow it to go negative, it's going to run out of a bucket. It doesn't really know what to use, and it falls back on current, which is going to put your pricing out or your costing out. Okay, so in production, which is an add-on module, we have the capability of turning on scrap and yield. So if you don't track scrap or yield, you can turn it off so the fields go away. If you want to use revisioning, you can turn that on. So when you change a bill of material, it'll ask you for a new revision number. And the default category. So every bill of material needs a category on the top item and all the assemblies and sub-assemblies and the components. But if you don't use it, you can just create yourself a default one called assemblies or builds or something, and it'll add it automatically. Rentals, there is a separate video on how a rental system works. But what these settings are for is if you create a rental part number and you want it to have a prefix like R- and then the part number behind it, it'll do that automatically. Or if you want to use a -R, you can do that in our suffix. The warehouse that you can bill from for rentals, and then the template part number for when you create a new rental item, it picks up all the settings from that particular item. Okay, there's a lot of settings in here, so we've given you a tool to help you find certain ones. So if you go up here to type in a word, say cost, what this does now is it pares down the whole list to only the settings that have the word cost in it somewhere. So there's 2 of them here. If I backspace that back out again, you'll see there's a lot more settings, and as I type, it pares it down. And then everything's grayed out that doesn't have a setting in there. There's one here for sales orders, there's one for general ledger, there's one for inventory. So you can see that the list is only displaying the ones that have that word in it. So that's it for company settings.